gentlemen, I stand here before you today on behalf of the Egyptian presidency of COP27. I want at the outset to thank the Ugandan government and the International Organization for Migration for organizing this important and pertinent event. The nexus between migration and climate change, in my opinion, is one that is incredibly important, but hasn't so far been addressed in a holistic and a comprehensive way. We also in Egypt look forward to the outcome of this discussion and the important contribution that Uganda, IOM, countries of IGAD and the East African community have made to advancing this conversation on the regional level. And we sure hope that we can take it from here, advance it on the continental and the global level during COP27. Excellencies, I don't think I'm exaggerating if I said the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change comes at a challenging time, at a very critical time. A time of cascading risks, some of which are related to change and the extreme weather events that are impacting the lives and livelihoods of millions of people around the world. Some others have to do with the global pandemic, with a war in Europe that has the impact of a global financial crisis as well as a food security crisis. In the face of these risks, challenges, and threats, it is actually not time for despair. It's actually time for hope, for coming together, for reviving multilateralism as we move forward. It is time for action. And that is the way I think it is safe to say that Egypt approaches the honor and the responsibility of hosting the next COP, Africa's COP. Our focus is move from pledges to implementation, as was just mentioned. Our focus is not to lower, but to actually raise the expectations on issues of adaptation, mitigation. And since I am speaking from Uganda and on behalf of Africa, and yes, indeed, financing. This is an important issue that needs to be addressed. I want to assure you, Your Excellency, President Museveni and President Kerr, that we, in our effort, in order to, on one hand, make COP27 Africa's COP, and on the other hand, to raise the ambition rather than lowering it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Your Excellency, Honorable Keriako Tobiko, the Minister for Environment and Forestry of Kenya, was delegated by His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta to represent him at this function. I would like him to invite him now to deliver the President's message. Thank you.
Your Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency Salva Kiir, the President of the Republic of South Sudan. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. Your Excellencies, first of all, let me convey the warmest greetings from my President, your friend, Kenyatta, who would very much have wished to be here with you on this important occasion, but could not because of circumstances in his control. He has asked me to deliver, Your Excellency, his remark both as president, but also as the chair of our host. And it's my duty to read his remarks. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UN, and 1.5 degrees centigrade will be reached before 2040, 2100. This report further warns that climate hazards will increase in frequency and intensity. Further, the war in Ukraine is now being used as an excuse to backtrack on the commitments made by some of our developed countries, partners, to stop the use of coal. This lack of commitment by our developed country partners, including the G20 countries, to urgently reduce emissions and provide adequate climate finance to developing countries for climate action is putting Africa in a crisis. Millions of our people are caught up in multiple intersecting crises. These include geopolitical tensions and conflict in South Sudan, Ethiopia, and DRC, land degradation, COVID-19 pandemic, and the climate-induced drought emergencies in the Horn of Africa. These multiple crises hit hardest where people are already living in conditions, ill-equipped to withstand and to recover from consecutive disasters and conflicts. Excellencies, Africa is known for its long history of migration, both voluntary and forced. In many parts of the continent, communities are spread across 2 or 3 nations. Cross-border migration in Africa represents an important livelihood and coping strategy. It is often used as a route to flee from conflict, seeking pasture, or seek better socioeconomic opportunities. We all experience cross-border migration in different magnitudes within the East African Community region. To address these concerns on migration and climate change, the African Union Commission has developed a number of policy instruments that all of us know about. Firstly, the African Union Agenda 2063, which commits to building climate resilient economies and communities. The recently launched Africa Climate Change Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan for 2022-2032 and Multilateral Forum. Excellencies, as you are all aware, on 2nd February 2022. Following this appointment, I held a CAHOS meeting on the 27th of June 2022 on the margins of the recently held UN Conference on Oceans. This meeting adopted 1, the African Commission position, the African Common Position, and the key messages to COP27 as presented by Zambia as the chair of the AGN. 2, Africa's priority for COP27 as an implementation COP, as presented by Egypt as the incoming COP27 presidency. And lastly, Africa's common position on oceans as presented by the Africa Union Commission. The CAHOS meeting also launched the first African Climate Change Resilience Development Strategy and Action Plan 2022-2032, and the African High-Level Commission on Seas and Oceans to improve coordination and consolidate decision-making on ocean, seas, and blue economy around the continent. As agreed during CAHOS meeting, Africa priority for COP27 will focus on adaptation as a key priority for the continent, closing the existing climate finance gaps, especially on adaptation, financing loss and damage to the impacts of climate change, pushing for an ambitious mitigation plan for keeping 1.5 degrees alive, and recognizing, and this is important, the special needs and circumstances of Africa. Further, to continue with the momentum to COP27, as a number A number of events and meetings have been lined up to mobilize support and consolidate our position in regional meetings similar to this meeting. Some of these events include Africa Climate Week, the Africa Climate Week in Gabon, AMS meeting in Senegal, pre-COP27 in DRC, climate meetings of the UN General Assembly, Africa Day at COP27, just to mention but a few. We once again express our fullest support to the Arab Republic of Egypt and to the designate COP27 President Egyptian Foreign Minister, His Excellency Samir Shakri. Excellencies, at the East African community level, a number of climate change and environment-related policy instruments have been formulated, with regular ministerial meetings convened to monitor progress on implementation. Despite these efforts, the region is still experiencing devastating climate change impacts and internal displacement of our population without adequate resources to respond or monitor the movement. The World Bank report on internal climate migration in the Lake Victoria Basin countries released in 2021 projects that there will be 16.6 million to 38.5 million internal climate migrants in the Lake Victoria Basin countries by 2050, and that this could be reduced by 30% with concrete climate and development action. In the region, Kenya is a major recipient of conflict and climate change migrants, putting additional pressure on our limited resources, while we also have to deal with climate change impacts and other economic challenges. Excellencies, to respond to these impacts, my administration has put in place several disaster risk reduction mechanisms, environment and climate change legal instrument, institutional framework reforms, and safety nets, including cash transfers. Further, my administration committed to reducing emission by 32% against business as usual scenario by 2030. Despite these efforts, climate change continues to challenge our adaptive capacities and overwhelming, most particularly the youth, elderly, women, children, who are vulnerable and have contributed least to this problem. To survive climate change impacts and reduce climate-induced migration and displacement, Africa needs long-term investment in resilience building, early warning systems, and climate-resilient infrastructure. It is for this reason that I urge our developed country partners and big emitters to urgently reduce emission to keep 1.5 alive, meet their climate finance obligation in a transparent and timely manner, finance loss and damage, increase funding for adaptation, and recognize the special needs and circumstances of Africa. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to thank the government of Uganda for hosting us and the organizers of this meeting, and hope very much that we will integrate the outcomes of this meeting into the discussions during the upcoming COP27 in November of this year. Thank you for listening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for delivering the President's remarks. Your Excellencies, I would now like to invite Honorable Okello Oryem, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, who is representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs, to read the joint declaration on migration, environment, and climate change. Honorable Oryem.
Your Excellency, Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, colleagues, ministers, honorable ministers in the different distinguished capacities, Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, representatives of the IOM, Executive Director, dear brother of IGAD, distinguished ladies and gentlemen in the different capacities. I'm Okello Riem, declaration. But let me also take this opportunity once more to welcome you all to Uganda for this very important meeting. We're grateful for this numerous attendance, having a full house here. At the offset, Your Excellency, permit me to express my highest respect to both of you, and also please accept my warmest compliments. Your Excellencies, the Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change by member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, African Community, ESC, and states of the East African Horn. The Inter-Ministerial Conference on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change on this 29th July 2022, Congress Speaker Resort Munyonyo, Kampala, Republic of Uganda. We, the Ministers of the Environment, Minister of Interior, and Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the governments of the member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, and the East African Community, ESC, and the states of the East and Horn of Africa, having gathered together with high-level representative on the African Union, UN, and development partners, and the youth at the Inter-Ministerial Migration, Environment, and Climate Change, the spirit of regional and integration and friendship that ties the countries of East Africa and the Horn of Africa, Eritrea, Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Republic of Kenya, Republic of Rwanda, Federal Republic of Somalia, Republic of South Africa, of South Sudan, United Republic of Tanzania, and the Republic of Uganda. Concerned by the adverse effects of the climate change crisis on our people and livestock, place an urgent call for enhanced cooperation and action to address the following. A, the progressive desertification and land degradation create the forced mobility of people and livestock. B, the unsustainable use of ecosystems and the impact of frequent events on people and livestock. C, the unplanned migration of our people from rural to urban centers as a result of climate change and disasters. D, the paucity of data and statistics on the impact of climate change on human and livestock mobility in the region. And E, the limitations of partnership and financing to the climate crisis adversely affecting the mobility of people and livestock in the region. Recognizing that East and Horn of Africa region is severely affected by environmental degradation, floods, landslides, sandstorms, tropical cyclones, drought, water levels rise, and rainfall variability. Notably, in one alone, 2.6 million new displacements occurred in sub-Saharan Africa, creating climate mobility crisis. To strengthen economic growth, sustain social cohesion, and sustainability in our region. The serious of declaring our commitment to timely respond to critical matters of migration, environment, and climate change and adverse impact on people and livestock through enhancing cooperation on the climate change mobility crisis. Note with concern that groups including women, girls, youth, the elderly, persons with disabilities, migrants, displaced persons, pastoralists, and minorities might be threatened with marginalization in exercising their rights to access climate action opportunities. Guided by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, 1966, United Nations Council Resolution 3520, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Paris Agreement of 2015, the United Nations Convention on Combat Desertification, 1994, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, 2015-2030, the Agenda for the Protection of Cross-Border Displaced Persons in the Context of Disaster and Climate Change, 2015, the New Urban Agenda, 2017, Article 28, the Conventions on Biological Diversity, 1992, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, 2018, the Global Compact on Refugees, 2013, the UN ILO, International Labour Standards, the African Union Agenda, 2063, and the Glasgow Climate Pact, 2021. Recalling previous decisions of the Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, on long-term cooperation action to ensure understanding, coordination, and cooperation in regard to climate change-induced displacement, migration, and planned relocation, appropriate at the national, regional, and internationals. Recalling the parties, recalling this agreement acknowledges that climate change concern of mankind, that adaptation is a global challenge faced at local, sub-national, national, regional, and global dimensions, and contributes to the protections of people, livelihood, and ecosystems, taking into account the urgent and immediate needs of those small island states and developing country party that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effect. And the Paris Agreement, FCCC, CP 2015, L9 Decision 50, requesting the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism to establish, according to its procedures and mandate, a task force to complement, draw upon the work, and involve and appropriate existing bodies and experts group under the convention, including the Adaptation Committee and the Least Developed Countries Experts Group, as well as relevant organizations and experts bodies outside the conventions, to the FCCCP 2015 L9 Rev 18 development recommendations for integrated approaches to avert, minimize, and address displays related to the adverse impact of climate change. Noting the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal of adaptation with a view to adaptation action in line with Cancun Climate Change Adaptation Framework and the Decision 1 CMA 3 Glasgow Climate Pact of 2021, acknowledging the rights of migrants when taking action to address change. Aware of progressive work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in line with the Working Group 2 Report on Climate Change 2022, Impacts, Adaptations, and Vulnerability. Recalling The mandates that emerge from the 26th UN Climate Change Conference, that is the COP26 in Glasgow, in 2021 to inform the preparations for the 27th UN Climate Change Conference, that is COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in November 2022, towards robust climate actions, deeper cut greenhouse gas emissions, enhance resilience to adopt the effects and financial support for developing countries, including preparations for the first global stocktake at the 28th UN Climate Change Conference, that's COP28, at the end of 2023. Recognizing and appreciating the leadership of the government of the Republic of Uganda in this dialogue on climate change, environment, and migration. Further recognizing and appreciating the partnership between IOM and the UNFCCC with member states, the AU, EAC, and IGAD in facilitating this important dialogue on the migration, environment, and climate change. In this context, therefore, we, the Ministers of Environment, Minister of the Interior, and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the EAC, IGAD, states of the East and Horn of Africa, having gathered key messages of experiences from government experts, the youth, community leaders, as well as development partners in the spirit of international cooperation and regional integration, hereby commit to 1. Build and strengthen climate resilience and adaptations of all communities living in fragile ecosystems, flood-prone water basins, low-lying areas, and mountain slopes, including enhancing urgent regional and national legislation, policies, and strategies for action. 2, implement and domesticate the provisions of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. Underscore states' role to address desertification, land degradation, and drought as one of the drivers of poverty and forced mobility. 3, facilitate a conducive regulatory and policy to enhance the socio-economic benefit of remittance, trade, and investment. 4, engage multilateral development banks and financial institutions and development partners to create or extend financial relief to countries hosting migrants and disaster displaced persons. Create and/or increase investments in circular economy, renewable energy and energy efficiency, climate and smart agriculture, green economy, blue economy, digital economy, and nature-based solutions. 6, develop comprehensive urban plans to address population surge in urban arising as a result of adverse impact of climate change in marginal rural areas, including promoting rural-urban collaboration to reduce vulnerability and create adaptive mechanisms for safe migrations and access for sustainable livelihood. 7, work with the private sector to improve urban-rural connectivity for the youth and traders through internet access, technological advancements, provision of energy, and road or railway infrastructure. Number 8, establish and strengthen regional and national weather and climate institutions and systems to generate accurate, timely data and information on climate change impacts on human mobility and increase collaboration amongst member states and with the IGAD Center of Excellence for Climate Prediction and Applications. 9, address knowledgeable gaps by understanding and applying indigenous knowledge and practice to the development of appropriate adaptation responses to reduce the context or specific vulnerability of communities to the impact of climate change. 10. Apply and integrate gender and human rights-based approaches in the design and implementation of policies relating to climate change and migration nexus. 11. Establish an IGAD, ESC, and States of East and Horn of Africa Inter-Ministerial Working Group on Climate Change, Environment and Migration, develop a plan of action for the implementation of this declaration and monitor and report regularly on progress and implementation by member states. 12. Request the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, AMSEN, the African Group of Negotiations, AGN, and the Group of 77 and China, and the LDC Group of Negotiators to take forward the work of IGAD, ESC, and states of the East and Horn of Africa Inter-Ministerial Working Group on Climate Change, Environment, Migration, and request to launch this Kampala Ministerial Declaration at COP27 with intentions to continue the work up to COP28 and beyond. 13, we further request the parties to A. Take action to avert, minimize, and address displacements in the context of climate change and disaster, both across and within borders. B. Strengthen support to countries and communities most vulnerable to climate change impacts to access new and additional scale up climate finance. C. Strengthen cooperation at all levels of government and communities and implement treaties, pacts, protocols, and regulations on free movement of people, labor, mobility, and transhumance. Facilitate capacity building and technology transfer for climate action and human mobility. E. Create a multi-institution, including for youth, to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage, and advance the global goal of adaptation in the East and Horn of Africa. We remain committed to address the climate change crisis and its effect on our people, livestock in the East and Horn of Africa. Finally, done at Kampala, this 29th day of July 2022, in two originals in English and French, both texts being equally authentic, to be signed by all those who are here. I thank you very much. God bless you all.
Your Excellencies will now transition to the second session that includes the signing of the declaration. And I want to invite Crane performers in exactly 2 minutes to entertain us as we bring the tables in front and set up that signing ceremony. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, surely a round of applause for Crane performers. May I take the pleasure of inviting the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Sam Chepto, to come and invite our heads of delegation to take to the front for the declaration signing.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Your Excellencies. It is now my privilege to invite the head of delegations to move to that table in front there so that we can sign the declaration. Because of constraints of time, I would like to propose that we only sign one copy in the front of the heads of state, and then after the heads of state have delivered their speeches and have gone, we shall complete the exercise. So please, heads of delegations, and we move to those tables, those tables, we sign the declaration. Is there a problem? The countries which will be signing will be the Republic of Burundi, of Djibouti, Democratic Republic of Congo, the State of Eritrea, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Republic of Kenya, the Republic of Rwanda, the Federal Republic of Somalia, the Republic of the Sudan, the United Republic of Tanzania, Uganda, the People's Republic of Algeria, the Republic of Egypt. Thank you. Hey, sorry. It appears I forgot the Republic of South Sudan. I'm extremely sorry. Yet it is the biggest delegation here. And please accept my apologies.
Your Excellencies, if you've noticed, there is 17 representatives in front of you. Those include the partners invited to witness this signing of the declaration, the Republic of Senegal, who are the presidency of the African Union, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the presidency of COP27, the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, who are guests to this Inter-Ministerial Conference, and the Republic of Zambia, who are chair of the African Group of Negotiators. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Great performance. Your Excellencies, may I request the delegates to each hold one folder for members of the press. We will all hold one folder and have it to show in front of the press and of course in front of the principals who are here today to show your commitment to this declaration. So Lucy, if we would have each of the delegates have a folder. All right, so just one more. All right, so with your indulgence, our delegates will request that we will find a way. The press is on either side. So my suggestion, let's move to the front of the table. Lucy, if we could have our delegates move to the front of the table because the table becomes a distraction. And members of the press, this is your moment. I only have a minute before I invite the minister who will invite their excellency. So delegates, members of the press, find the perfect position because we must pronounce the great news of the Kampala Declaration, the Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment and Climate Change, signed here in Kampala on this 29th day of July, 2022. So ladies and gentlemen, mine is request you now to put your hands together for our commitment to this Kampala Declaration. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, the Honorable Ministers, and Your Excellency, the ambassadors here. We thank you so much. Thank you very much, heads of delegation. Thank you so much. I now will take the pleasure of inviting the Honorable Minister, Sam Chaptoris, to invite the Excellencies to speak to us. You're welcome, Honorable.
I want to thank the ministers for signing the declaration. Excellencies, it is now time for our principals to address us. And I want to take this opportunity to invite His Excellency the President to chair the next session. Thank you very much.
His Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, the honorable ministers, and all the other delegates. It is now my honor. I want to congratulate you on signing the declaration. And it's now my honor to invite His Excellency General Salva Kiir to address you. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda. Honorable ministers and delegations that have come to this conference. Distinguished senior officials of the pre-COP27 Secretariat, representatives of the East African Community, EAC, the Intergovernmental Authority and Development, IGAD, and Horn of Africa, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to convey my heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to His Excellency and brother, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, for the warm reception and generosity he accorded to us, the attendees of this summit. This conference came at a critical time for our region. It came at a time when we are facing varied climate-induced disasters, such as floods, droughts, and landslides. These disasters affect our respective countries differently. Despite their different forms, recent studies have shown that we need to do one thing: adapt and adaptation means devoting resources to building resilient communities. Your Excellencies, South Sudan has submitted its nationally determined contribution along with its first national adaptation plan to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. What is contained in these climate action documents can only be realized with the help of climate finance from the developed countries. This call for the developed world to provide resources for the climate adaptation was reaffirmed in the Paris Agreement. It is also justified by the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities in the same agreement. Despite the urgency of climate change, we are yet to receive 100 billion United States dollars pledged by the developed world to the developing world in 2020. While this amount is below the target, we have not received it, and we only hear that 2023 is the time it will be raised. By then, it may be too late. I have a young daughter who spoke here before, representing women and the youth. I want to assure her that South Sudan has given 35% to women in the current government. The woman is the Speaker of our National Assembly for the first time. And a woman is the Minister of Defense. So other ministers like whom you have seen here, the Minister of Environment, which we are talking about, is also a woman. As countries, we have contributed less to the emission of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, and the ones bearing the brunt of climate-induced disasters. We need to unite and call upon the developed world to meet its commitment to fund climate adaptation immediately. We cannot cope with the climate-induced disasters indefinitely. Big polluters in the world must live up to their commitments and avail the resources. Currently, over 60% of our people in South Sudan are categorized as food insecure and in need of life-saving intervention. From the climate-induced displacement, mainly flooding, the Republic of South Sudan has been struggling with record floods for the last 2 years. The floods have already destroyed many communities in the low-lying areas in 6 out of the 10 states. In these areas, people's lives have been altered by internal displacement of over 1 million persons, along with destruction of livestock, wildlife, and crops. These floods induce losses, if not tackled urgently, can lead to increased irregular migration that can affect countries beyond our borders. Another issue of concern to us is deforestation. This is really critical because 99.9% of our population depends on forests as the sole source of energy. To us, a quick transition to clean and renewable energy will elevate the resources on our forests. In our plan to save our forests, we target to generate 3,000 megawatts of power from hydro, solar, wind, geothermal, and natural gas. Achieving this goal requires financial support, capacity building, and technology transfer. All of which depend on climate finance. To effectively address climate change threat to our region and the world at large, South Sudan would like to 1. Underscore the importance of adaptation. Our region needs a balance between mitigation and adaptation, where 50% of the climate funds be earmarked for adaptation projects. 2. Stress that the $100 billion that was arbitrarily set is no longer sufficient. This amount needs to be raised upwards. Seven. Three, appeal to all parties that have not submitted their national determined contributions to do so urgently to allow us to keep the 1.5 degrees goal alive. In closing, I would like to affirm South Sudan's commitment to Kampala Declaration of the ministers responsible for environment, migration, and foreign affairs of the government of the member states of IGAD and the East African Community. We will stand by what is agreed in this declaration on its entirety. Let us all go to Sharm el-Sheikh in November, speaking with one voice of this declaration. We have no other choice than to adapt to the changing climate. With faith in humanity, I have that the developed world will live to its commitment and avail the needed resources for this important task. Thank you very much.
Environment and natural resources are at the core of sustainable development and critical for socio-economic development and transformation, healthy ecosystems, and human survival. Therefore, the issues concerning migration, environment, and climate change are not new to us in Uganda. Our people, the majority of whom are already vulnerable and have limited capacity to adapt to the impacts of climate change, have continued to experience increased frequency and intensity of floods, droughts, and landslides associated with the impacts of climate change. In 2010, we had to relocate and resettle about 3,000 people from Mount Elgon sub-region, Bududa district in eastern Uganda, Chiriandongo district in western Uganda, after their home villages were devastated by the landslides on March 1st, 2010. Last year, I emphasized that the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly that climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time. As we are aware, Africa is disproportionately susceptible to climate change impacts. We continue to witness loss of lives and livelihoods from the damage caused by the climate change related disasters. Your Excellencies, the scientists have been continuously warning us on the need for enhanced and collaborative action to combat climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, an international scientific body on climate change in 2022, published its 6th assessment report. The report concluded that climate change has reduced food and water security, hindering efforts to meet sustainable development goals. In Africa, flood and drought-related acute food insecurity and malnutrition have increased due to climate change. Climate change is contributing to humanitarian crises. Climate-related hazards such as floods, as you had His Excellency Salva Kiir telling you. South Sudan is a country which is flat in many areas, and you hear what he was telling you. Droughts, like what is going on now in some parts of the Horn of Africa, even in parts of Uganda. Landslides impact the already vulnerable communities, increasingly driving displacement, insecurity, conflicts, and involuntary migration of people in all regions of the world. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, an annual average of 21.5 million people has been forcefully displaced by weather-related events such as floods, storms, wildfires, and extreme temperatures. These extreme temperatures recently have been cooking the Europeans. The Europeans have also been cooked now this time. London, the temperature has got 41 degrees centigrade. The different parts of the United States, Spain, all those places, people have been suffering with a lot of wildfires and so on. As we are all aware, East Africa, here in Uganda, we have never had 41 degrees. Not even 35. Here in Kampala, we have never had those temperatures. Karamoja may be 35. But 41 degrees centigrade. We could see people fainting in Europe and the United States. So people who don't listen, they cause a lot of problems for everybody, including themselves. As we are all aware, East Africa and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, and many African countries rely heavily on natural resources. The changing climate and weather conditions are putting our economies, our communities, agriculture, health, water supply, hydropower production, road infrastructure, and housing at more risk and making us more vulnerable. We cannot afford to take no action. In collaboration with our highly esteemed partners, such as the Nationally Determined Contribution Partnerships, most of our countries have updated their national climate action plans, also known as Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs. As African countries, we reaffirm our commitment to the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Africa Agenda 2063. Generally, for African countries, climate change adaptation is key in addressing the impacts of climate change at all levels, including addressing loss and damage and increasing the resilience of communities, infrastructure, and ecosystems. This is consistent with the African Union Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan 2022 to 2032 that aims at building the resilience of African communities, ecosystems, and economies, and supporting regional adaptation. No country can address the challenge of climate change alone. We must work together to increase adaptive capacities while minimizing the negative impacts of climate-related displacements and involuntary migration. I appeal to you to take advantage of this opportunity to further discussions on climate change and human mobility, to inform the upcoming 27th United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP27, that is scheduled to take place in Egypt later this year. The commitment we have made today is our first landmark, strengthening our cooperation in relation to climate change-induced human mobility, including migration, displacement, and planned relocation. The outcome of this conference is to bring the issue of migration, environment, and climate change to the mainstream national and international forums, especially in the climate change negotiations during the 27th United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP27. Here in Uganda, we can give testimony to the dangers of mismanaging the environment. There is the global mismanagement of the environment by those who are emitting greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, which is a very good gas, because carbon dioxide is a good gas if it is used properly. You remember, carbon dioxide is captured by plants, and the plants use it to manufacture food for us. So the issue is not just carbon dioxide, it is the misuse, the greed. Greed is the biggest problem. Greed of people who are looking for money in a quick way Otherwise, carbon dioxide is used by plants, as you know, through photosynthesis to manufacture food. All life has got carbon in it. But those people who are greedy for money have caused this problem of increasing those greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So these are the ones we are telling you must stop. And we should insist on that, so that the globe does not become warmer than it should, than it should be. And that means also planting trees, more trees, because trees can capture back that carbon dioxide and imprison it. All those trees contain carbon dioxide, and they are constantly capturing it from the atmosphere to make actually good things for us. But then, even ourselves, we should also, here in Uganda, I don't know about the other countries, even ourselves are contributing. For instance, destroying the wetlands is our responsibility. It is not the Europeans who are destroying the wetlands, it is us. The Chinese, when we got in touch with them, introduced a culture which our people here didn't know, the culture of growing rice in swamps. I don't know what swamps they use in Asia, but here, what they call swamps are actually tributaries of the River Nile. So when you grow rice in the swamp, you are committing a very big crime. And this is us, it's not the Europeans. This must stop. Now, I don't know how the scientists briefed you, but here in Uganda, 60% of the rainfall is from the oceans, from the Pacific Ocean, from the Indian Ocean, and sometimes from the Atlantic also. But 40% of the rain is from our wetlands here. And the ones in South Sudan, and the forest in Congo. Therefore, by interfering with the forest, interfering with the wetlands, we ourselves are destroying 40% of the rainfall of this area. So the countries of the Great Lakes, you really need all to watch. In Uganda here, I'm having war to make sure that nobody cultivates in the wetland. You cannot be cleverer than God. God is the one who said this is a wetland, this is the lake. You can imagine people go to cultivate in Lake Victoria as if they are mad. This is water. God is the one who said this is water. This is in the book of Genesis. You go and read the book of Genesis, even if you are not Christians. From the beginning, God said, He created the world, and then He said, let water separate from the land. And some parts were water, some parts were land. Now somebody comes and says, God was wrong. What he made water, I will make a garden of rice and mayuni and all that takataka. This is terrible. So, and these scientists, I don't know whether they have briefed you, the Ugandan scientists, they were able to show me that 40% of the rain Uganda get, some parts of Uganda get, is from local water bodies. And they showed me that here where we are, near the Entebbe airport, is where the equator passes. Where you landed at the airport, that's where the equator passes. So you go on going north. By the time you get to places like West Nile, you are at degree 3 north of the equator. Now, the northeastern part of Uganda, Karamoja, is also north, 3 degrees, 4 degrees north of the equator. But they get 35 inches of rain when the rain is good in Karamoja. In the northwest, Acholi, some parts of Acholi and West Nile, they get almost 2 times. They get 60 inches of rain. Why? Because of the swamps in South Sudan and the forest in Congo. They are the same latitude, Karamoja and West Nile, but the other one gets almost 2 times the rain of the other one because of the local water of the nearby water bodies and forests. So if this science is known to people, how can we kill ourselves, commit suicide by attacking the wetlands? The wetlands must be vacated. The river banks, I want to congratulate our Tanzanian brothers. I was recently in Arusha for our meeting there. They have done a good job in Arusha town. Those streams there, they are all protected with plants, there are forests in Arusha town. Although the other area is dry, but near Mount Meru, you see very good protection of the forest, so that the river banks are protected with vegetation, so that the runoff water doesn't sweep soil into the river and all that, like in the lake here. Cutting the vegetation near the lake shore. Very, very irresponsible. So, while we in Uganda are quarreling with the Europeans for the greenhouse gases, but we must solve our own problem, which we can solve ourselves, which is interfering with the rain cycle of our wetlands and water bodies, which contribute to our rain, our own rain, not the rain of anybody else. As I conclude, I would like to thank you once again for putting aside your valuable time and for the commitment that has contributed to a successful outcome of this conference. That declaration is very good. I wish you all a pleasant stay in Uganda. Did they say I was closing or opening? Oh, but I'm saying you should stay here. Although we have closed, you stay around and enjoy yourselves. I thank you all and I wish you good luck. Thank you very
much. Your Excellency, there is just one request. After the anthems, we'll have some photos taken, and I will guide when that happens. I would like now to take the pleasure of requesting that we all be upstanding for the anthems. Thank you very much, Police Brass Band. Your Excellency, as we organize the parties, protocol, please organize the parties for the photos. We are requesting, Your Excellencies, the ministers and the heads of delegation. That's the first photo. Protocol, you could guide them to where the photo is going to happen. And then the next photo will be the UN agencies, our development partners that are here present, who will be then taking a photo with the Excellency the President. So may I request protocol to manage our first set of photos, which is the ministers and heads of delegation only, please. Of course, this will include the UN IOM, which is the UN Migration, as hosts. Then the next set, and this is also to request the UN agencies, led here by the UN Resident Coordinator and the other heads of the UN agencies. That will be the second photo that will include members of IGAD and also the IOM. That's the second set. So the first set of pictures, the presidents will take a photo with the ministers, permanent secretaries present here, and the heads of delegation only. Protocol, please manage, and then we'll bring the heads of state. The rest of us can remain seated. Again, please note, coffee will be served immediately after this, and then I'll let you know where lunch is going to be served. Thank you very much. So the first photo will be with the ministers, the heads of delegation, and the permanent secretaries. Please note that the ministers represent the 12 member countries of the states of East and the Horn of Africa, and also our visiting delegations, the delegation from Egypt, Senegal, Algeria, and Zambia. So that is the first photo, and shortly I will introduce the second photo. So all right, so that's the only photo. That's the only photo, ladies and gentlemen. We want to thank Your Excellencies for joining us this morning and early afternoon. Your Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Your Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit. We want to thank you so much for being part of this very historic moment. The high-level Inter-Ministerial meeting or conference on migration, environment, and climate change. No, they're finished. We want to thank our partners, the member states present here, the UN family, and of course, the Ministry of Water and Environment that has put this together. It's been an exciting 3-day conference that concludes this afternoon with the declaration, the Kampala Ministerial Declaration of Member States of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the East African Community, and the states of East and the Horn of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, coffee is served. I have some feedback, guys. So ladies and gentlemen, coffee is served. However, I need to let you know, our VIPs, that is the heads of the delegation, the UN family, and also the ministers present here. Lunch is served in the tent next door. So the tent next door, please make your way to the tent. All right, so the Honorable Minister, does mention that the heads of delegation, please note that the declaration pages that were not signed are going to be signed also. So protocol will be handling that, and I'm hopeful that we can do it now. If you want a cup of coffee or tea, please feel free to pick it. But please note, if you're part of our VIPs, lunch is in the tent next door. That is the ministers and the heads of delegation, plus our development partners, the UN family, and Your Excellencies, the ambassadors. Lunch is next door. For the rest of us, our invited delegates and the other guests, lunch is at the Staples restaurant. The Staples restaurant at the Resori Ballroom. The Staples restaurant is where we shall have our lunch. And this includes the service providers. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference bags, crane performance, crane performance, crane performance, crane performance, crane performance, crane performance. I'm trying to make them keep quiet. Crane performance, crane performance. 1 minute crane performance. All right, so the heads of delegation, you're being guided by our protocol teams, the heads of delegation. I also want to request that if you have a bag, a takeaway bag, please check. One of the bags has been taken and it has glasses. One of the conference bags, please check that if you have one of the conference bags, that it doesn't have someone's glasses, someone's specs, please. Thank you very much. So please note that the VVIPs, our ministers and the heads of delegation are having lunch here at the Mango Garden in the tent. And for the other guests, our service providers and members of the press, our lunch is at Staples Restaurant. Staples Restaurant. For our ministers and the heads of delegation and heads of the UN agencies here in Uganda, lunch is at the Mango Garden in the tent right next to us. The coffee is served. Enjoy yourselves, and thank you so much for joining us. Just a quick announcement: if your bag, the conference bag, please check that you're not carrying someone's conference bag where Zambia was seated. Please check the conference bag. There is some glasses in the conference bag, and we would like you to hand them over to protocol. We will be able to manage them, please. Thank you very much.
It is